Okay, well, good evening, everybody. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening. We've got a goodly number of you for this really important subject of GLP-1s, and we've called it Navigating the Minefield because it pretty much is a minefield of quite scary stuff, actually, that's going on. So I'll do no more. My name is Isabella Natrin, so I just want to share screen now. Okay, so there's the screen for this evening. So we're asking the question, what on earth is going on and what should we know more about? So please put in the chat who you are and why you're here. Give us a little bit more information. My name is Isabella Natrins. I'm the CEO at the association. I'm also a nutrition and lifestyle coach, and I am a registered health coach, obviously with the association. And I'd like to introduce you to my colleague, fellow registered health coach and nutritional therapist, Moira Newis, who is going to be leading on all the technical stuff this evening. Moira is also associated with Avid Health, who are sponsoring us for this webinar this evening. And when I say sponsoring, they are underpinning Moira's participation this evening. So let's just tell you a little bit about the association for those. I think there's a goodly number this evening who are not UKIHCA members. So we are the, actually I just realised I'm not showing you the full screen, so maybe I should do that. We are the Association for Health Coaching, professional body for health coaching in the UK and internationally. We do all the stuff that you would expect for a health coaching body to do. And I won't go through it all, but there is at the bottom there our website. Please go and have a look at our wonderful website. Loads of information. It tells you just about everything that we do and that we hope to do. So we'd like to engage your interest there. So let's look at what's happening in this space, people. You will have seen probably every few days on social media, in the newspapers, even on the television, how there is a wild west of what they're calling aggressive drug selling, aggressively marketed to British consumers through the often illegal promotions, a wild west of industry drug selling. So much so that the ASA have decided to really have a look at what they're doing and bring in cudgels to stop people from illicitly and inappropriately marketing these drugs. I can tell you that since I started doing research on this, and I'm obviously using Google to Google for information, to Google for corroboration of things that we want to say, I am daily getting an influx of unsolicited mail from GLP-1s delivered to your door and the like. It's scary, it really is. And not only that, it's triggering a price battle amongst online pharmacies. Even high street chains are cashing in on the demand. And that's from Global Newswire there. Polaris, market research, tells us that GLP analogues are currently, well, in 2024, 46.7 billion, growth of 21%. And by 2034, look at the figures on these drugs. Can this be right? What is going on? Before we go any further, we want to make quite clear that we are a health coaching professional body and a professional association. This means that the content that we're sharing this evening is for information only. We must ask you not to use it to advise or prescribe or treat a patient or a client, or indeed yourself if there are any members of the public here. We wanted to run this webinar to alert you to some of the issues, some of the benefits indeed, but some of the risks and many of the unknowns around GLP-1 prescribing and usage. If you want prescription advice, get it from a clinically qualified healthcare practitioner, and Moira will be talking to you more about that later on. If you are considering taking GLP-1s, or if you're working with somebody, urge them to seek personalised nutritional advice from a registered health professional qualified in nutrition or nutritional therapy, and you'll understand why later on. We urge you to seek health coaching support for any clients or patients that you might be working with from a qualified registered health coach, and we can direct you to the website there for our register where we underwrite their credentials. And if you're wanting to talk to a client or a patient or yourself around physical activity, please go and have a chat with a qualified physical activity professional. They're all there to help people who are either taking these prescriptions or to support colleagues in other sectors who are working with such people. Moira, over to you.
Okay, so I'll just need to share my set of slides. Okay. It's always a difficult public screen actually when she's done this, unfortunately. So, how do I get onto the slideshow?
You'll find a slide share at the bottom. The larger screen at the bottom. I can show your slides if you prefer.
I should be able to. Normally I can see it, but for some reason I've got a very big ruler tonight. Oh, actually I've just managed to move it a bit. We should be okay. Right, here we go. Okay. No, that's not what I wanted to share. Apologies. Right, slideshow. Okay. Sorry.
There we go.
Right, so thank you, Isabella, for the lovely introduction there to set the scene for tonight. And I'm really delighted to see so many people on the call. So before we start to talk about GLP-1 drugs in more detail, I'm just going to remind you of a few facts about obesity, because, of course, that's really at the heart of this whole topic of weight loss. So this is the definition that we're working with of obesity. So adults with a BMI of 25 to 29.9 are considered overweight, and adults with a BMI of over 30 are considered obese. Now, while these are the definitions that are in common use, one word of warning, which you might be well aware of, is that there are problems with the BMI calculation because it's known to be an inaccurate measure of body fat content, and it doesn't take account of muscle mass, bone density, overall body composition, and racial and sexual differences. And just one example of where this might be a problem would include athletes who are very muscular, who can have a BMI that would put them into an overweight category. So, obesity in the UK, well, in 2022 to 2023, 64% of adults aged over 18 in England were estimated to be overweight or living with obesity. And there's been an upward trend since 2016. And obesity rates are similar amongst men and women and increase with age up to the age of about 64, where it peaks, and then decreases again in the older age groups. But overall, the problem is still on the rise, unfortunately. As I'm sure you'll all be aware, obesity is associated with a huge range of other health problems. I'm not going to read them all out, but pretty much the risk for all chronic diseases increases if you're obese. And the World Health Organization has been sounding the alarm since the 1990s, calling it a global health epidemic. and being clear that there are social and environmental, it's a social environmental disease linked to modern lifestyle. In 2022, they reported that 1 in 8 people in the world were living with obesity, and that obesity has more than doubled since 1990 for adults, and adolescent obesity has quadrupled. And I just included this slide because it goes into a bit more detail about the impact of obesity on all the kinds of body systems and conditions. And it also points out the psychological, economic, and even generational impact that it can have. So if you want to know more, you can go and look this paper up. Just to let you know that wherever there's a significant paper talked about, there is a reference at the bottom if you want to go and read it later. So, you know, obesity has a huge impact on health, which I think, you know, we probably already know, but just, you know, to set it in context before we sort of continue. So let's now look at the GLP drugs in some detail. So GLPs are from the incretin family of hormones, and they're produced in the gut after we eat a meal. There are 2 main hormones in this group which are relevant to today's talk: GLP-1, which stands for glucagon-like peptide, and GIP, that stands for gastric inhibitory polypeptide, which is another hormone in the same group. Some of the drugs we're going to talk about today include both of these hormones. Incretins were first discovered in relation to gastric bypass surgery, and it was found that in only a few days after surgery, there was a 3 or 4 times increase in the level of these hormones. And incredibly, although patients had not yet lost weight, they had reversed their type 2 diabetes. And the first GLP-1 drugs that were developed were used in the management of type 2 diabetes. So how do GLP-1 drugs work? Well, their role is to increase insulin secretion. So they help to lower blood sugar levels. They suppress glucagon, which reduces the liver's production of glucose. They delay gastric emptying, prolonging digestion, which helps to lead to the feeling of being full after meals. And they reduce appetite by acting on the brain to suppress hunger, again leading to calorie intake and weight loss, reduced calorie intake and weight loss, sorry. So you might be beginning to see why GLP-1 drugs have been seen as a bit of a game changer for the management of obesity. All these effects combined make a huge impact on the body's physiology. I've chosen this image just to show you in a slightly different way how these drugs work. So the GLP-1 and GIP hormones are released from the gut when we eat food, and this in turn stimulates the insulin release and inhibits glucagon, with the effect of lowering blood glucose and creating that feeling of satiety. But usually, this is a very short-lived impact on our physiology because an enzyme called DPP4 breaks down these incretin hormones very quickly. However, when we take a GLP-1 drug, they're not actually the hormone, but rather they act on the same cell receptors as the natural hormone does, the technical term being an agonist, meaning that they mimic the effect of the hormone. As a result, they're resistant to being broken down by this enzyme, and their half-life can vary between several hours to several days, compared to only minutes with their own natural production of the GLP-1 hormone. And this results in a prolonged insulin secretion. Well, sorry, it's not prolonged insulin, but it results in a prolonged effect with glucose regulation and appetite suppression. So let's look at what the direct impact of these drugs on fat cells is. So fat cells, fat cells have GLP-1 receptors on them, so they're sensitive to the action of this hormone, and they can help increase the breakdown of fat in the body and suppress the pathways leading to fat storage. They can improve insulin sensitivity, which in turn can lead to better overall metabolic health. In addition, they can reduce appetite, which also helps reduce overall food intake and hence calories. Because they suppress glucagon, they create an environment that favors the uptake and use of glucose, resulting in enhanced insulin sensitivity. There's less fat stored in the liver and also an overall increase in energy expenditure. And this latter point is still really being investigated, but it's thought to be due to a number of mechanisms, such as an increase in the activity of brown fat with more mitochondria activity, that's the little organelles that make energy in our cells, possibly all leading to an increase in the basal metabolic rate. Okay, so let's look at what drugs are out there. Another little scope of practice alert, just to remind you, this is for information only. All the same caveats apply that Isabella mentioned before, that we're not advising, prescribing or treating. And we'll talk about some prescription, where you can get prescription advice for in a moment or two. So these are the key drugs and their brand names that are out there, which you've probably heard of. In terms of obesity, the two you really need to know about are Wegovy, which is a GLP-1, and Mounjaro, which is a combined GLP-1 and GIP drug. As mentioned previously, GLP-1s were originally designed to treat diabetes, and the doses have really been increased in order for them to get substantial weight loss effects, but they're really the same drugs, just under different brand names. So, for example, Ozempic and Wegovy are the same drug in different uses. They have a different name. So this is the criteria that NICE have set out for prescribing the drugs on the NHS. And you can see here that people either have to be obese or be overweight with at least one weight-related health condition. The drugs are recommended for use in specialist weight management clinics, but GPs can prescribe out with this in line with their local policies, and that's similar in Scotland as well as England. There is going to be some local variation, and not all geographical health boards or trusts or bodies in the different areas will have finished incorporating the guidance into their local prescribing procedures. So there is going to be some variation in the postcode prescribing of these drugs at the moment. So as I mentioned at the start of this talk, GLP-1 drugs are prescription-only drugs, which means you can't legally sell them to someone without having a prescription from the drug from a suitably qualified prescriber. And that means either a doctor or an independent nurse or pharmacist prescriber. On the NHS, specialist weight management clinics will be one of the main places that you can access the drugs, but it's becoming increasingly common already for GPs to be prescribing them too. And out with the NHS, you can get a private prescription from a private GP or from prescribing pharmacists, as well as digital healthcare providers who might have teamed up with a suitable professional agency to offer a prescription service for GLP-1 drugs as part of an obesity program or something similar. And there are pros and cons about these different providers, which is mainly down to the safety checks that are done in the system and the ease at which you can access the drug. And it's also important to note that there have been many instances, as Isabella mentioned earlier, of illegal drug sales, which of course come with all kinds of health warnings, as you can't even be sure that you're getting the right drug or at the right dose. This is an example from an online pharmacy that prescribes and sells GLP-1 drugs. Prescribers are recommended to provide a consultation that's appropriate to meet the needs of the person, and which allows the prescriber to get enough information to prescribe weight management treatment safely and appropriately. It does not have to be face-to-face, it can be online. According to the General Pharmaceutical Council, this ideally involves not relying solely on an online questionnaire, but instead ideally using a two-way communication between the person and the prescriber, allowing the person to ask questions and the prescriber to get all the information they need to prescribe safely. But there are a lot of online systems being used for this. That is what is happening in practice in many areas, just to note. It should include independently verifying the person's weight, height, and or body mass index. And this helps to increase the reliability of the information that the prescriber is receiving, supports safer decision-making, and ensures the supply is appropriate for the person in particular. And this can be through a video consultation, in person, from the person's clinical records, or by contacting another healthcare provider, such as the person's GP. It should also ensure that there's a suitable arrangement for ongoing monitoring and provide advice on what to do if they experience side effects from the medicine. Prescribers must also consider issues such as eating disorders, body dysmorphia, and mental health issues when they make a decision to prescribe these, as these conditions can play a part in a reason for requesting the medication in the first place. So here are some of the effectiveness and risk findings from a very recent article looking at GLP-1 drugs that was published in the journal Nature in January this year. And it found the risk of lots of conditions were reduced, which suggests that we're going to see these drugs being prescribed for a lot more reasons than just obesity and diabetes in the future. But it also found some increased risks in specific conditions, things like gastrointestinal disorders, arthritic conditions, pancreatitis, and kidney disorders, for example. So like many drugs, people are going to have to weigh up, along with their health, along with their prescriber, they're going to have to weigh up the pros and cons when they make a decision about taking them. So next, I want to touch on how our diet impacts GLP-1, which is not something you see in the news every day, unfortunately, like the drugs. But what we eat can make a difference to the levels of our internally produced hormones, which we're going to have a little look at. Again, a little scope of practice alert here. That again, this is information only, and if health coaches in particular, do not provide personalised nutrition advice, we should signpost people to an appropriately qualified person to do that. Oops, not moving forward. Let's see what's happening. There we go. Okay. So when we eat, GLP-1 is produced in the gut, something that I touched on earlier. It's produced quite far down the intestines, actually, which means that food that's absorbed very quickly when it hits the intestines, such as like pure glucose, for example, or a highly processed food, maybe like a smoothie, might not trigger it as well as whole foods. So that's something to be aware of. All the three macronutrients will trigger GLP-1 secretion, but fat has by far the most potent impact, which is one reason that a fat meal helps you to stay feeling full for longer. And fat has other similarities to GLP-1 because it helps to stabilize blood sugar and suppress appetite, and the drugs, just as the drugs do, because they're have similar effects that we touched on a couple of slides ago about suppressing hunger hormones and things. So although all three macronutrients do have an impact, fat is by far the biggest. There are others too. So dietary soluble fibre promotes GLP-1 secretion, and the action of our gut bacteria on fibre also produces substances that again stimulate GLP-1 release. So you can see here that both prebiotics and probiotics are beneficial because of this. And bile acids also increase GLP-1. They're released when we eat a fatty meal and help with the emulsification of the fat so they can be absorbed into the bloodstream. And actually, the combination of all these foods will tend to maximize GLP-1 release by activating multiple pathways in the body. And just a reminder that you can't prescribe a personal diet approach, but you can suggest where people can access information, you can share information, and you can start a conversation about these things. So talking about diet, how do diet trials for weight loss compare to GLP-1 drug results for weight loss? So we're going to have a little look at this now. So one little secret that doesn't get mentioned very often is that all the trials done using these drugs have been done alongside providing dietary support. So they're not actually drug-only trials. Now, the drugs trials tend to use a low-fat, low-calorie approach. And as you'll see in a moment, this approach does work. It can help people lose weight and even reverse metabolic health conditions like type 2 diabetes. But unfortunately, they're not a sustainable long-term solution. You can't do a low-fat, low-calorie diet for life because you can't get sufficient nutrition for optimal health. And just to give you one example of that, you will likely become deficient in fat-soluble nutrients, vitamins, for example. And the other problem we're going to look at in more detail in a moment is that if you come off the drug and go back to how you were eating previously, you're likely to gain the weight back again and potentially end up heavier than before you started. And we know this is also true of bariatric surgery. If you don't change your lifestyle, it doesn't tend to work in the long term. So what results have trials got that have used nutrient-dense real foods diets for weight loss? Well, here are a few results, including one by Verda Health you might have heard of, which is a leading digital healthcare provider in America that employs health coaches to support their clients. But you can see here that the weight loss is pretty good. And remember that even a 5 to 10% body mass loss can have huge health benefits. So let's look at the drug trials. The study that was really the pivotal point for GLP-1 drugs was this study published in 2021 on semaglutide. No previous pharmaceutical trials had got results on this scale for weight loss previously. And in this study, they took around 2,000 adults with a body mass index of 30 or greater, or who had a body mass index of 27 and at least one weight-related coexisting condition, but they did not have diabetes. And they were randomly assigned to 68 weeks treatment, either a placebo or a once-weekly injection of the GLP-1 drug plus lifestyle interventions. And the results show there was a significant weight loss ranging from over 5% to over 20% taking the drug. And this is the same trial looking at it in a slightly different way, and we can see that the effect is substantial between the placebo group and the drug group, but the effect starts to plateau at 60 weeks into the trial, and it looks like weight regain is actually starting to happen just as the trial is stopped. So we don't really know what would have happened if it had continued past this point, but there's no doubt that in the 60 weeks there was really significant weight loss compared to the placebo group, at a level that had not really been seen before. So over time, we've had more studies published. And after that, the first study I just put up, the next one that really moved the scale even more was the SURMOUNT-1 trial, which was the first large-scale phase 3 trial of tirzepatide, a GLP-1 and GIP receptor agonist. And it was a groundbreaking study due to its significant weight loss outcomes. And this is the drug with the brand name Mounjaro, and participants lost up to 22.5% of their body mass on the highest dose, which was 15 milligrams after 72 weeks. It involved 2,500 adults with obesity or who were overweight with at least one comorbidity, and it was actually spread across various regions of the world and covered different ethnicities too. 11% of people dropped out over the 72 weeks, and the main reasons people dropped out was because of gastrointestinal discomfort, such as nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. Another reason was the inability to continue with the diet, which was a low-calorie, low-fat, energy-restricted diet of only 500 to 750 calories a day. And remember, this is 72 weeks. So it's a very long term. It's quite a long time to be on that kind of restrictive a diet. So although it was energy restricted, people were encouraged to keep up a moderate protein intake, consume low glycemic carbohydrates and small amounts of healthy fats. And they got lifestyle counselling to help them with their choices and with things like emotional eating too. They were also advised to engage in moderate intensity physical activity for 150 minutes a week. So you might have come to the conclusion, again, that this is not just a GLP-1 study, it's a GLP-1 diet, exercise and health support advice trial. And if you want to replicate the results in the real world, you probably need all this support too. So let's look at what we want to be eating to support our long-term health if we want to lose weight and optimize our health when we're using these drugs. As I said, all the trials were done, provided dietary support and a low-fat calorie approach to diet. And while this can help you lose weight, and we've seen the substantial weight effect it can have, and it can reverse metabolic function, I've mentioned already that it's not sustainable in the long term. And not only is this kind of diet nutrient deficient, but if you stop the diet and you just go back to how you were eating previously, then you're likely to regain the weight, as we mentioned too, and potentially end up heavier. And yeah, I think I'm mentioning again that, other things like bariatric surgery prove that this is the case, that, to get long-term change, we have to have a lifestyle that you can sustain, that's nutrient dense and includes real whole foods. So we want to be eating those kind of foods and avoiding ultra-processed foods in particular. And all of that's going to help us feel full, it's going to help support a healthy metabolism, and it's going to help us retain muscle mass too, which, as you'll see, is very important as well. So let's look at some of the potential risks. There are quite a few risks to be aware of with these drugs, and I've just picked out some of the main ones from the literature here, and I'm going to go on and look at a couple of them in a bit more detail. But you can see here there's thyroid cancer, gastrointestinal disorders, pancreatitis, malnutrition, muscle loss and sarcopenia, gallbladder and biliary disease. So quite a few significant things, and I've put all a reference in for all of these if you'd like to go and find out a bit more about them. So I've picked out a few. The first one's malnutrition and obesity. And, we've already touched on this, so it's not going to come as a big surprise. But it's just a reminder that obesity itself, despite being a state of overnutrition, can hide varying degrees of malnutrition. And this is down to poor diet quality, including lots of processed foods rich in sugar, carbohydrates, and seed oils, as well as being lacking in sufficient protein, healthy fats, vitamins, and minerals. If someone in this position takes a GLP-1 drug, which is going to help limit their intake of food, when they're already at risk of malnutrition, I think you can probably see the situation might get worse. And that's really why eating a nutrient-dense diet is so important if you're taking a GLP-1 drug. So I've just included this because it's a really nice handout by the Aspen group. If anybody wants a little bit more information, again, be careful of your scope of practice here, but some of you are going to have other scopes of practice as well, and it might be useful for you. But it covers lots of things like strategies to mitigate against muscle loss and spelling out some of the nutrient deficiencies that are common with weight loss as well. So it's quite nice. You can have a little look at that afterwards, but it gives some good ideas of things you might want to investigate a bit further. So as we touched on, muscle loss can be quite a problem with these drugs. So this study found that reductions in lean mass varied between 40 and 60% as a total proportion of weight loss, with other studies finding around 15% or even less in some cases. And it's thought to be a combination of muscle and bone loss. And there's probably lots of variation from person to person, but it's quite a big problem. And it means it's very important to get the diet and the physical activity right to try and prevent this lean muscle and bone loss. Interestingly, a study from Denmark that I was just looking at today, so it's not in here, unfortunately, but it found that over a 52-week period of GLP-1 use, that bone mass was lost in the lumbar spine, the lumbar spine, the hip, and the tibia, and that the blood markers for monitoring bone loss continued to accelerate throughout the trial period. So these are potentially serious problems that could lead to osteoporosis and sarcopenia in future years. So I'm not going to go into this slide in any more detail, but it's just to give you a bit of an example of all the multiple potential medication interactions with these drugs. And really just to say it's another very important reason why you need to buy from a reputable source who's going to check out this kind of thing for you or for your clients. Another potential risk to touch on is dehydration, not because the drugs themselves cause it, but the side effects of the drugs, things like vomiting, diarrhea, and things like that, can make it very easy for somebody to become dehydrated, which is going to put them more at risk of complications from things like type 2 diabetes, for example. So it's really important that people stay well hydrated. So what about discontinuing the drugs? Do people need to stay on the drugs forever? And why do people stop taking them? So here you can see the reasons people reported stopping their GLP-1, which are due to side effects such as inadequate glucose control, nausea, vomiting, and other gastrointestinal side effects. Some people cited the cost of the drugs. Some don't like having to inject regularly. Some people didn't lose weight, interestingly. The biggest reported issues were actually that it was difficult to plan meals, it made them throw up, and it caused weight gain. So it can be difficult for people to know what to eat and even to feel like eating sometimes on these drugs. And it's obviously not much fun if you're feeling sick and you're throwing up a lot of the time. So of course you would stop the drug in many of these situations. So what happens to your weight if you stop taking the drugs? So the first thing to say is there's not yet sufficient evidence on this, as the trials have not really been going on for long enough to give us all the insights that we need to know. So this trial followed people up for 1 year after they'd stopped the injections and found that the participants had regained 2/3 of their prior weight. So we don't know what happens like 2 years after. This is just a year after, but it's not looking that good at this point. And remember that potentially 60% of the original weight loss was muscle and bone. And unfortunately, unless they've substantially changed their diet and done exercise, it's much more likely that all the weight regain is going to be fat. And this potentially puts them more at risk of having a higher percentage of body fat than when they first started. To be clear, there are still a lot of unknowns, and we're going to have to wait for longer term data before we fully understand everything about the drugs. You know, another question might be, can the bone loss be reversed? There's no studies on that yet, so we really don't know. So just to mention one other little unknown that's coming up in the media, and that is the impact on eating disorders. There are concerns that GLP-1 drugs can trigger or exacerbate eating disorders, particularly in adolescents whose brains are not fully developed, and there are signs of increasing relapses to disordered eating patterns amongst patients taking these drugs. So just remember that a good consultation with a qualified prescriber should potentially include a discussion about this, which might prevent some of the problems that could happen. So are GLP-1 drugs the answer to obesity? Well, they certainly might help, but there's a lot more needed to support somebody at a personal level with sustainable lifestyle change, which of course is where a health coach can help by providing information and support. The bigger issue, though, of course, is that obesity is environmental and social, and the biggest problem is really the food environment. And we need government action to help address this and make it much easier to navigate and make healthier choices. Health coaches can play a very important role in helping support someone who's considering their options for weight loss. First, remember the medical ethical principle to do no harm, and make sure you stay within your scope of practice and put safety first. Health coaches use a whole person, whole health approach, helping people to look at the bio, psycho, social, emotional, environmental, and spiritual elements of their lives. And you can sign people to information, discuss things with them, encourage them to think about the pros and cons, help motivate them, support them to make decisions, to help resolve obstacles and challenges, and celebrate their successes too. So let's just look at this a little bit more. So there's a lot you can do. This comes from the UK IHCA Health Coach Scope of Practice, and it gives you, this is really good because, and it's worth spending a bit of time looking at it afterwards, because it really allows you to work out what you can and you can't do in some ways. So, there's a lot you can do to facilitate, empower, support, and assist clients, to offer accountability, to signpost them towards the right information, and engage them in conversations on a number of different things, including things like food, sleep, and movement. So there's huge potential for health coaches to have a really positive impact in this area. Just touching on what you can't do unless you have an additional scope of practice. So you can't assess or analyse client symptoms, you can't diagnose them, you can't interpret the laboratory tests or other data, you can't give specific personal recommendations about diet, you can't suggest they remove food groups, for example, or eliminate things, you can't recommend supplements or prescribe a meal plan, and you certainly can't prescribe or de-prescribe any medications. You must always refer back to the appropriate practitioners to do these things. And of course, we can't claim to prevent or cure any conditions at all. So a little bit more about how we can support clients who might be taking these drugs. And we'll just have a little think about what this might mean. What might a whole person, whole health approach mean in this situation? It might mean talking about real food, being supportive to the person. You may also have had a personalised diet. That person may have had a personalised diet prescribed to them by somebody who is a nutrition specialist, and you can support them in helping to implement that. But you can do all those things about discussing things, supporting them, signposting them, around the whole real food topic, which of course has been in the news a lot. So people are well aware at the minute, I think, of ultra processed foods and real food debate. And the same goes for physical activity, for emotional and social support. And of course, you might recognise potential red flags. And, some of the things we've been talking about here, like muscle loss, gastrointestinal problems. If your clients are coming presenting with any of these things, then they might be red flags that you need to flag back to an appropriate professional. Maybe the GP, might be somebody else if it's a mental health concern, or the appropriate professional. Establishing relationships with your local GPs might be really useful in this situation, because this is going to become quite a big problem, that there's a lot of people on these drugs and they're not going to have the holistic support package around them that is probably needed. So here's just some of the other suggestions for referrals. Personal trainers or exercise on prescription schemes, actually, which are available in a lot of areas now, might be very good options. There are social prescriber schemes in many areas that actually can cover quite a large range of things that can help people get out and about, to socialise, to get emotional support. And of course, we've got the mental health end of things with counselling and psychotherapy and things. So a health coach, may well draw on several other professionals to provide somebody with the support that they need. And just remember to consider your client's readiness for change, because depending on which stage they're at might change how you go about trying to support them. They might need your support to consider options before they're ready to commit to make change. And they might have already tried and struggled without support, and now they're ready to try again. Think about where they are in this upward spiral of attempts to make change, because most people coming to you who want to lose weight are going to have tried something previously. So find out what it was and what happened, and help them learn from that experience so that this time around they're more likely to be successful. So here are some areas, just again, that you might like to offer information and help your clients to explore further. All these things would be very good in the context of what we've just been talking about. And again, just a reminder, offer to share information and signpost clients to appropriate information, but don't give them personal advice. But you can definitely have a conversation around all of these topics. You can find out what they know about it, what they think about it. You can find out how motivated they are to make change, what they've already tried, etc. And all of that is going to be very, very helpful to them moving forward and making change. Again, just a reminder about what's not appropriate to share if you're only a health coach. Sorry, it's not. I'm wrong. It's just a follow-on. Sorry, I was thinking we were doing that now. So these are things, again, that we can discuss and share with clients. So the benefits they perceive around things like movement during the day, their challenges to moving about more. I'd also include things like sleep here as well. Their knowledge of these topics. Do they know anything about muscle mass? Do they know about resistance training? Many people may not have a lot of knowledge of that. So when we talk about exercise, people will often be thinking about cardio exercise instead. And also, I love this small steps, big wins, because I use this all the time in my coaching, that, the smallest steps are likely to end up with the biggest wins eventually, because if you overload a client with what they're trying to do at the beginning, quite often that client just won't do any of it. So sometimes it can be just as simple as saying, well, I'm going to go out the door tomorrow morning, I'm going to put my shoes on, go out the door, and I'm going to go outside. And if that's the first step in that client starting to move more, it doesn't matter how far they go. Even if they just walk down the drive and come back, that's the start. And the likelihood is they're going to do a little bit more each day. So here's a couple of examples of what this coaching approach might look like in practice, the kind of example conversation that the coach might have with a client. So here we've got the client saying, I should be active, do some more exercise, but I can't seem to get myself going. So the coach is saying, well, yes, it's really hard to get motivated, isn't it? Is there anything you've tried before that you could try again? And the client's, well, not really. The weather's not helping. It's raining too much. And the coach suggests, well, there are studies that show that, weight resistance training is important for general health, and particularly when you're taking this medication. And it's been shown to be very effective. What do you think about that? Have you come across this information? What do you think about it? And start that conversation. And the client might say, well, what is resistance training? I don't know what it is. Do I need to get muscle? Do I not sure I want to get muscle bound? And the coach will say, well, that's fine. Let's share some information. would you like to hear a bit more about it? I can point you to these resources. You know, there are other people that might be able to help with this. So this is just an example of the kind of conversation you might want to start to have with these clients. And other areas that you might like to help your client explore, all of which are really important in relation to weight loss. You know, things like identity, beliefs and self-awareness about themselves can be really important. Also, you know, what is motivating them? Is it intrinsic? Is it internal things, or is it extrinsic things? So, you know, do they want to be able to play football with their grandchildren, for example, or do they want to look better? You know, there are different motivating factors, and drawing those out, but trying to find the ones that are more internal can be better in the long run. So encouraging that kind of conversation can be really helpful. Goal setting. So, you know, getting your clients to set themselves goals. It might be long-term goals and it might be short-term goals. And all of those can be helpful. We can have weekly goals that we break down as well. So at every level, you know, having an idea of where you're trying to get to is really important. Reflecting on relationships with food is really important here. And there are some good resources out there to help you with this, to signpost clients to. We have now got, in the UK, we've got the Public Health Collaboration Charity, which I'm an ambassador for as well. And they provide a food addiction programme now called Liberate, which is fantastic. And there's also other resources, people like Dr. Helen McCarthy, who's known as the Appetite Doctor. So there are really good resources out there. Relationship and support networks, also something you could talk to your clients about, because again, for me, this is really, really important, that to sustain, you know, of these changes does require, you know, support, whether it's from your partner, from your family, from your friends, from your work colleagues. You know, how difficult is it for people going into work when somebody offers them a biscuit box every day, for example? You know, so as well as professional support, you know, thinking about their networks they've got that they can tap into locally. And it might be that there's resources in the community available to support them too. So we're just about at question, but before I do, I'm going to say my very last slide, if that's all right, Isabella. And I'm just going to thank Avid again for sponsoring me to do this talk today. And as mentioned just before, Avid are a digital first evidence-based healthcare provider, and they're currently offering an obesity weight management programme, which several of the UK IHCA coaches have been involved in, which we're very proud of. Avid does provide personal live health coaching sessions. It uses smart technology to help engage, track and educate clients. And we're also about to publish the results from our own obesity weight management programme, which we're very excited about because we've got great results. And we're a big believer in diet lifestyle change along with good health coaching support too. So I will stop my share. We can't hear you, Isabella.
I'm here.
Oh.
Thank you so much, Moira. Well, that was a rather rapid gander, wasn't it, through the minefield? And I must admit, you know, when I was, as I say, when I was doing my research, you know, my jaw was dropping further and further with each article and a new piece of information that was actually, you know, out there. I guess the opportunity is now for, I've got some messages. First of all, I'd like to just thank colleagues from Solution Makers. Wherever you are, guys, you're giving us quite a lot of great information and links this evening, and those links will go out with the recording so that, hi there, Solution Makers, I see him waving. Oh, both of you. No, oh, there's Sophia. Yeah, hi. Yeah, we'll send those links to the papers and the various resources that you've shared with us out with the recording so that colleagues can have those at hand. So some questions here. Simona, can you write this in the chat, the names of the resources you just mentioned? You will get those, Simona, in the post-event email with this recording.
Thank you.
Should people take up their protein intake? Christina, this is a question for a nutritionist, and I'll turn to Moira to respond to that, but it's personalised advice. It would depend very much on all kinds of things. Moira.
Yeah, so as a nutritional therapist, I would obviously be saying, if I had a client in front of me, I would be saying absolutely, and we'd be wanting to look at the kind of guidance for protein intake, which would be around the region of 1.2 to 1.7 grams per kilogram of ideal body weight. But if I was just health coaching a client, I'd be encouraging them to find out about that. I'd ask if they knew about it. We'd have a kind of discussion about why protein is really useful in the body for growth and repair, why it's helpful with weight loss, all those kinds of things too. So, and I do that anyway as a nutritional therapist, but, as a pure health coach, you would take a slightly different approach to it. But absolutely, protein is going to be really, really essential if you're taking these drugs to get a reasonable, a good intake of it, because it will help with retaining that muscle mass, which is so important for health, as we all age in particular.
Thanks very much. I'm just looking now at, let's have a look. It's growing research suggesting micronutrient deficiencies may contribute to mental illness. There certainly is. This is Bianca. Given that incretin analogues often reduce appetite and food intake, potentially leading to deficiency, is the long-term impact on mental illness also being considered? I doubt it somehow, but we live in hope. Additionally, since these medications slow gastric emptying, could prolonged food retention cause the risk of bowel cancer? All very relevant questions, I'd have thought. I am not in a position to answer those, but is there anybody in our audience here this evening, or indeed Moira, that can throw any light on that?
Well, I can talk a little bit about it, because I kind of specialize in mental health in my nutrition professional now. So I think this is going to be one of the areas where there isn't a lot of evidence yet, because not a lot of studies have been done in this area. What I would say is there's going to be a lot of interest from patients in the mental health sphere, because many patients on mental health drugs put weight on. Weight gain is a big problem. So if you are ever in any mental health Facebook support groups, you will find that one of the main debates going on at the moment is about weight loss and these drugs. But I'm not in a position to advise on whether, on the medication side of things. And obviously many people are on other drugs, and that, they would have to have a conversation with their prescriber about that. But yeah, it's interesting. One of the fascinating things for me, though, is that many mental health conditions do have an insulin resistance component to them. And these drugs are supposed to help with people becoming, help you become more insulin sensitive. So, they may play a role there, and we're going to have to wait and see what that is. But of course, so does food, exercise, sleep, and all the other psychosocial support. So I'm not recommending anything in that situation. Yeah, somebody else might want to answer.
Anybody want to, keen to say anything? You can, welcome to raise your hand if you want to make a contribution. I have a question here, Mia. Mia is saying that the one thing a client I am seeing is saying is that it's helped stop the food noise she had. This is something that we often hear, isn't it, Moira? That food noise has gone. So if someone has some form of addiction to food, whoops, to food, then perhaps some people it might work even if it's temporary. She wanted to see me to make sure she's not going back to bad habits when she stops taking Wegovy, and she's making huge steps forward in a very short time. I think it's a real issue, and it does, that there is a lot of literature about it stops this food noise all the time, people thinking about food from the beginning of the day to the end of the day. And I'm sure Moira would agree. From my perspective as a health coach, it's so important, and this is something I would really welcome some more conversation about this evening from those of you here, is what about this wraparound support that we're hearing about. We're hearing about wraparound support. Very often that's kind of reduced to, well, they need to eat healthily and do some exercise. Period. It's much more profound about, than those two hugely important elements. a nutritionally rich diet, of course. Very difficult when you've now not got any appetite at all, of course. And the processed food industry leaping in to say, we have new products for you. So if you're on GLP-1s, we are, here we are with this whole cupboard full of, additional ultra-processed food that are supported with additional nutrients that you may be missing from your ultra-processed food diet, which may have contributed significantly to getting you where you are. So it's very much, a self-fulfilling prophecy. But I do think that we, as certainly looking through the chat, there are a lot of health coaches here this evening and people who are using coaching. I would welcome some conversation on any questions you have around how do you talk to your clients, or any information you'd like to share, or your experiences to share. How do you talk to people? What kind of ways can you engage with them? Because this wraparound support lifestyle is much more than just going for a walk every day, or swinging a few kettlebells around, or lifting a few weights. It's that whole intrinsic motivation that Moira was talking about earlier. It's what is it that I want my health for? It's engaging a client not only about why they're either on the medication and what the thoughts are about that, but for those who are thinking about it. The classic that I'm hearing a lot, people, at dinner parties saying, none of those things, they're private prescriptions, online prescriptions, because they need to lose a bit of weight because they don't like, they want to look a little bit better. Of course they do. Look at Instagram. It's telling us all the time that we're not good enough. We don't look good enough. We're not slim enough. We're not this enough and that enough. But the whole idea of ourselves as health coaches is really to make a noise and to really understand how anybody that might be coming to sit in front of us these days, because of the kind of promotion that's happening, that wild west of drug selling. It's on the TV, it's in commercials now. It doesn't say it explicitly, but it doesn't take you 2 seconds to understand that this weight loss medication is actually a GLP-1. Anybody sitting in front of us could be on that medication and we don't know. They might not like to admit it. Or they could be considering it, so it's for health coaches. And this is really what's motivated us to do this webinar this evening, because it's a risk for you too. If you don't know what your client is doing and what they're on and what they're thinking, if you haven't got a handle on that in the most professional way, you are putting yourself at risk by not being aware of many of the issues that Moira has shared with us this evening. Not the technical issues, not the prescribing issues, but the fact that the impact and the interaction that these medications have on an individual. Moira, I can see you're wanting to say, and I see that Mia had got her hand up.
I was just going to comment on the food noise thing. So I didn't mention it actually, and I probably should have done in my presentation, but there's so much you could carry on about GLP-1s that it's never ending really. The food noise is probably the biggest thing, to be honest, that patients tell you or clients tell you. The effect is that it just stops the food noise completely. So I can definitely see in the area of like food addiction, that there's maybe some benefits there, but there's also, lots of risks too. So one thing I'll just pick on what you said is that, when people don't feel like eating, it's even more important that they have nutrient dense foods for when they do eat. So that, I think that's one thing to be aware of as a health coach, is that, clients may well be quite pleased that they don't feel like they need to eat. So it can be, if you don't feel like eating, it's difficult to motivate yourself to shop and prepare food and eat it, right? So, it's a problem in itself that is going to take a very different coaching approach, I think, to try and explore. And in the short term, maybe it's not an issue, but it is going to be an issue if people are on these drugs for like long periods of time. And interestingly, I've got a client who has told me that they're on a GLP-1 drug in a group coaching program I have at the minute, and she has lost a lot of weight in only the first 3 weeks, to the point that other people, she hasn't told the rest of the group that she's on the drug, but it's the other people are potentially becoming a bit demotivated, that they think she's getting all the benefits from diet. So it's having another impact on the group in a way that you wouldn't have anticipated. That actually potentially demotivating the rest of the group because they're not getting the same result. So it is, yes, it's complicated, isn't it?
Very much so. Mia, did you want to say something? You had your hand up recently.
It was, I'm not sure if I remember the client that I'm seeing at the moment. I mean, she is exercising and she's eating healthily. I mean, all she was trying to do with me is just making sure she's continuing those habits. But my only concern at the moment is that she's now talking about stopping Wegovy because it's not having the same effect anymore, and then having a break and then starting Mounjaro. Is it called Mounjaro?
Sure.
I think, okay, well, I can't really say don't do it because that's up to her, but so I think, okay, let's see how that goes. So
so if her issue, not to be giving consultation advice here, but if her issue is not weight loss, not enough weight loss as expected, is that what you say? Really, the suggestion ought to be, you need to talk to a professional nutritional therapist, your doctor. I'm going to read, it's gone. Solutions makers, guys, you've put up a very good comment here. The major problem we observe is related to massive lean body mass loss in people who use GLP-1s for lifestyle reasons. Sorry about this, my thing keeps moving. It's not fat loss. Only up to 60% can be muscle mass loss, which is rapid and immediate. A discontinuation is 100% fat gain with substantial sustained long-term BMR reduction. This has profound health implications, making further attempts to lose weight much more difficult too. So that for your client, Mia, would be very relevant information.
Even though she's exercising.
What exercise is she
doing?
She's
doing personal training, weight resistance, also, quite a lot of it actually. So it's a bit. So
is there anybody here who is the physical activity sector who might want to comment on how
we sorry, I work in the health and fitness industry and have done for many years, but the only question is that not every personal trainer is qualified and understands the complexities of obesity, and that is something that we are, as a health and fitness industry, trying to build more education around to upskill.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
that's useful. Thank you.
Very much the case. I know that SIMSPA, your professional body, is working very hard to educate personal trainers around this area. It is seen that PTs can make, and physical activity professionals can make a huge contribution.
I think the other thing I'd just say in relation to Mia's point there, Isabella, is that most people, well, maybe many people who are overweight are going to have tried to lose weight at some point already before they approach you as a health coach, and they're probably going to have had some success or little success. I mean, we don't know, but the reason they're going to be coming back again is that it hasn't worked to the point which they want it to. So so they're going to have baggage with them about that experience, and it makes them more likely in that situation to want to try what seems like a miracle cure. Because it is difficult to lose weight. It's not an easy thing to do. And anybody who's just been, I've had so many clients that have said, well, I was at the GP, and I'm not trying to blame GPs for this, so please don't take this the wrong way, but I was at the GP, and the main thing he said to me was, you need to lose weight. But, GPs, with the best will in the world, do not have the time or the resources to have that conversation, and there are not many opportunities to refer people to get that, kind of support. So people are often coming, having often tried quite hard, to be honest, and and, you know, felt that they failed. So it's a difficult, so I think exploring all that is a really good way to start the conversation, to be honest, because if you can do that, it offers up the opportunity to then bring in alternative, you know, viewpoints and information and things that you can explore a bit further that they might not have been aware of, I think. So that for me would be like the starting point, is to try and unpick it a little bit, to see what their beliefs are about, you know, because most people do know there's a lot of concern about the drugs too, so they're not coming at it with a completely rosy view. They do know there are risks attached to it, and that they don't even really know what the long-term outcomes are in some cases. You know, people are relatively well informed about that, I would say, but still it's drawn, it's like a, you know, it's a magnet to sort of draw people in to say, well, we want to give it a go. So if they're going to give it a go, then, you know, just make sure that they've got that support around them. Absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Moira. I'd like to just read a comment by Sophia Murray-John. Thank you, Sophia. And Sophia, we know, is a health coach in a GP surgery. And she says she often has people coming to her because they want to start the medications. She uses it as an opportunity to drill down as to why and highlight that it is a potential tool, but that they need to have a lifestyle approach, which the meds might be helpful in, but need to discuss this with a proper professional. So I think that whole focus of, not that Moira has made it very clear in her presentation, we know from the literature and the data that GLP-1s can be hugely beneficial to people, not only in their weight loss mission, but actually for protecting them potentially from other conditions. We also know increasingly that it is absolutely critical that every medication is supported by the wraparound, which is about you as an individual. I would suggest that we need to start thinking with our clients about what got them to the point of having to take the medication or wanting to take the medication in the first place. This is not psychotherapy. It is helping the client explore, as Moira said, their beliefs, you know, their feelings about their health. What is it that they want their health for? Helping them explore what their intrinsic motivations might be, you know, not the, you know, I don't know, swimsuit on the Costa del whatever, or the pair of ski boots that's going to take them down the slopes, but, you know, their feelings about their health, their identity, their vision of themselves as a healthy individual, and whatever that might mean to them, whatever they're starting, what is it that they want their health for? And let's start with that question, and then we can see why, how to support them when they're wanting either to take the medication or indeed, let's try a bit longer before we take the medication. I know Moira has a thought about that.
Well, I was going to say the other thing that is going to happen, but we're not seeing it yet, is people are going to start coming off the drug again. And so just thinking ahead for us, there's going to be, although we're at the wave at the minute where people are going on the drug, we're going to end up with waves of people coming off the drug too. Now, there is only one study that's been done out there on transitioning people off the GLP-1 drugs with a wraparound care, and that was done by Verta Health, and it was very successful. People used a nutrient-dense real food diet and transitioned off with health coaching support and sustained their weight loss. So that's a really important point for us as health coaches to take on board, that with the right information and support in place and some health coaching, they, you know, there could be a good story out of this as well, which is that their drugs might have been really, really beneficial, and then people can sustain a nutrient-dense real food diet to keep the weight off in the long term.
Thanks, Moira. Lou Walker. Hello, Lou. I don't know where you are, but it's nice to see you here. She is saying, do people think we should be asking potential or new clients directly on a client intake form whether they are using or considering GLP-1s? I ask about other medications, so perhaps specifically asking about GLP-1s would be a good idea. Well, it wouldn't be a bad idea, I think. you know, when I was in practice, I always asked for the medications, and when anybody was presenting with a weight issue, you know, I've come to you because I'm sick of diets and I need to lose weight. You know, I always started, well, can we just park the weight for a little while and let's get to know, you know, a little bit more about you, and, you know, all of that other stuff around their psychology and their beliefs about their weight. Very often it was an issue of stress management. The weight, we never got to the point where they wanted dietary advice or anything like that. I'm not suggesting, of course, that this is the case in you know, taking GLP-1s, but it does indicate to you that let's, you know, let's rewind a few steps back, let's go upstream a little bit, and not just assume that a client is coming because that is their presenting problem. So Lou, I would ask, if I were you, also like to just read out Julietta has said her biggest concern without a doubt is patients' mental health. I've had 2 particular cases where there was already history of depression and side effects made them drop their medication, and they regained most of the weight loss. This was something I was able to flag to the GP with urgency on the day. Also, the lack of support with nutritional education and a full picture of what else needs to be in place for lasting results. That's a concern. This is what I'm talking about, the wraparound, really.
Yeah, so just can I flag up on that, Isabella, because actually I think we had it in the draft slides, but we've lost it somewhere along the way, is that one of the side effects that's being investigated in Europe is the risk of suicidal depression. So there is an investigation going on about that. So there's definitely a concern that for some people, you know, there is the risk of severe mental health side effects too.
Yeah, I think it still is suicidal ideation. I think it's on one of the, I think it's still there on one of the.
Is it there? Sorry, I can't.
Yeah.
Spent too long looking at it. I've forgotten where things are now.
And she says, we can only take the benefits of this approach with a multidisciplinary action and an approach. Truly hope that health coaches can support this and be there for before, during and after. For many, these injections may very well be the turning point on their behavioural change if supported. Great topic, and thank you for bringing it. I agree wholeheartedly with you, Julietta. I think it's a huge issue that we as health coaches and other practitioners who are helping clients make behavioural changes, think about, you know, what they want their health for, the things that they'd like to introduce into, you know, into their daily routines. I think we need to really drill down and think about how we might, as coaches, approach those conversations and have that ready. Is anybody else got their hand? I'm just going through the slides here. I've got, Maria says, are there any studies on increasing GLP-1 via diet?
No, so one thing I should say is that although I put up the slides that show how natural GLP-1s are increased, there is a massive difference between the amount we produce naturally and the level that these drugs are going to have as an impact. As I said in the slides, that, you know, the amount we produce is relatively small, and it's also degraded very quickly by the enzyme in the system, so it doesn't have a long-lasting effect, and that's really, so yes, it does have an effect. And, you know, as health coaches, we know that eating nutrient-dense food, you know, that's got sufficient protein and fat in particular, can have all these effects. You know, it's possible to reverse your diabetes and things like this and lose weight just by eating like this, but I'm not aware of any studies that have looked at that.
Thank you. Jane from MM. You'll have to prompt me. Jane from MM. We offer health and wellbeing coaches for patients to support GPs and other clinicians in practice.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, there you are.
Hello, sorry, I didn't realise I was answering. Yeah. So I'm a coach based in GP surgery, so we offer the coaching support there, but also in groups. So increasingly, like everyone, we're seeing many people present either thinking about it, or we had one of the people I mentioned in the chat. She had come to us having just started some private prescription that seemed very nefarious, really. But as coaches, she was actually with my colleague. She joined the lifestyle group, and actually in the group, it's that was the one based in community with exercise and activity. We encourage everyone to get on board with one another and continue that post group as well. So it's that peer support, not only that internal motivation, but also that sharing of that newly found love of life and health and all things nutritious and active. So the person, I think, conversed to, was it Laura? Not Laura. I can't remember her name. Sorry. One of your other coaches presenting today. It was early doors. It was last year, actually. So she actually stopped. She hadn't shared with the group, or then did, I think, halfway through, but it was a case of actually she shared together, but actually my experience wasn't that great. I've really valued and appreciated the group space, and so she was more of an advocate. So it's converse to your experience. But we, interestingly, now for our larger group, a larger weight with higher BMI and comorbidities, what I'm finding for people who are on a waiting list, who have been wanting to start, are now saying, oh, well, I've started the weight loss drug, I don't need it, it's all fine. And that's it. So you're like, okay. But as coaches, we simply offer that sort of support to sustain and explore, but we can't do anything other than that. Yeah. And obviously the GPs and pharmacists are very much watching this space and managing that clinically. But yes, thank you for tonight, Bear. It's been really, really insightful, although very quick. Yes.
Thank you very much, Jane. That's lovely to share that. Is anybody else would like to share any of their experiences, or has a question that they might like to ask either myself or Moira or the group generally here? Around issues of health coaching or dealing with clients, or whatever. It is up to you.
While you're thinking about it, I was just seeing Kurt being in the audience is just reminding me of a surgical issue, actually. So he may have a comment on this, but yeah, one interesting thing is if your clients are going in for an operation, they might be best to know that they may need to fast for a lot longer for taking this drug than usual, because food can stay in the stomach for a lot longer. So, if you had been told to fast for 24 hours, there have been some case reports of people on these drugs having food still in their stomach 48 hours later, for example. So there's another potential problem to be aware of.
Thank you very much. Anybody else for anything else? No. Well, we're not quite up to time. Please let me know if you have any questions. You can always reach out to us at the association. The questions for Moira, I'm sure she will reply via Avid.
I think Dawn's got her hand up, actually. So
Dawn has, yeah. Dawn, what would you like to come in with?
Hello there. Yeah, so it's not really, it's more food for thought, to be fair. I know someone that personally, a member of family that is or was an addict of other substances, alcohol and drugs, and then thankfully managed to get off of those, and then turned to food. Became extremely overweight, obese, etc. And now he's been given this drug, one of these drugs, I'm not sure which one. He's delighted because, he is losing weight. He's just eating whatever he wants, and he can continue to eat what he wants, even though he knows he's addicted to food. He's admitted that. He knows his addiction has changed. So what is the potential for these people to become, that are already addicts, to become addicted to something like this? It's,
So,
it's very worrying.
yeah, well, it's interesting because one of the reasons that the suicidal ideation, one of the thoughts behind that is that the mechanisms that suppress some of the reward mechanisms are affected by these drugs. And that can partly contribute to the effect of people no longer feeling like the food noise, that's going on. But the worry is that it suppresses all kinds of reward mechanisms. So it might make you potentially less likely to want to exercise or go out or do other things. So sorry, I'm probably slightly at a tangent to exactly what you were saying, Dawn, because I've not heard of the other way around. But I can kind of see your point that, this is too good not to have.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's good to know, to be fair.
Well, I think, again, this is just going to depend on the individual person and their response to the drug at the end of the day, because it's not going to affect everybody in the same way, but potentially that one of the, so they are looking at the drug for use in other addiction services like alcohol and things because of its suppression on the reward system.
So you can imagine the downstream effects of that. So if we're now we're giving it for diabetes, we're giving it for obesity, with all of the issues that Moira has brought to the table this evening, and now we're going to look at it for other kinds of addictions. It's just a bit of a horror story of what we might expect of a population that, is on these medications. Yeah, Moira, Sophia is saying, I think we're in for some interesting few years. We get to see the effect of these drugs and what happens afterwards. I think, it potentially horrendous, isn't it? So it's so important that as health coaches, we are there at the table, informed. We're not the experts in the prescribing or the advice giving, but it is professionally our responsibility to be informed of some of these issues, to be able to appoint, wouldn't you say, Moira, our clinical colleagues that are not nutritionists. Many of these issues, there's the prescribing issues and the contraindications and the interactions with other medications, but there's also the dietary issues that we have discussed this evening. Now, I would suggest that unless you are a trained nutritionist, nutritional therapist, dietitian, or you have that in your scope of practice as another clinician, whether you're nursing or whether you're a doctor or physiotherapist or any of those other things, you need to get support from a qualified a nutritional therapist or someone who is actually qualified in those areas if you're working with a client on these issues. And of course, if we have, take into account people with depression and on medication that is controlling mood, it feels like it's just like blue touch paper and stand well back. So I think, health coaches have got a big role to play in this area. We need to be informed. We need to understand the variety of issues. I think, Moira, your slide deck is going to be really helpful for people actually just taking out slides and, printing them off and saying, look, this is an issue here. We need to talk about this, whether it's a GP or somebody else that they're actually professionally working with. It's a huge resource. Thank you very much, Moira, making me think really that we ought to actually have a follow-up on this from the behavioural and lifestyle, and actually have a workshop with health coaches and those that are in that coaching mode to give them some more help with how do you, it's like being Sherlock Holmes, isn't it? How do I approach this subject, sensitively with a client? It's like Lou Walker was saying earlier, do we ask everybody? Probably yes, because it certainly feels like everybody's going to be on the bloody things before too long, So yeah, okay. What else have we got here before it? Kurt, thank you. Says thank you, Moira and Isabella, fascinating subject. We need to meet up again in a year when we have learned a lot more about it. Too true, Kurt. So far, it's rather unclear, but the number of patients and clients taking it will enable us to learn with time. I'm worried about all the people buying it without a prescription and when they can't afford it anymore. Yeah, absolutely. I'm worried about the people that are buying it without a prescription and they've no clue that they haven't read Moira's slides. You know, I mean, that's enough to put you off, isn't it, really?
Yeah, and actually we haven't talked about cost, but the cost is quite substantial. We're into the hundreds of pounds when you order it as a, you know, privately, for the lot you get at that time. So it's another incentive to get people to do health coaching instead, because if they can afford the drug, they can afford some health coaching.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, recordings. Lots of people have said, what about the recordings? They are available. You will get that in an email with a link to the recording. So you'll be able to watch it, but the slide deck obviously is a major part of that. So all the information will be there. Any more before we sign off? Lots of thank yous. I'm very pleased that you're with us. You've been with us. You've stuck with us till the end of the show, so to speak. And what can I say to you? But I wish you the very best of luck going forward. And you know, be cautious, be confident, inform yourself, and ask for help. And I will certainly consider a follow-up webinar or workshop on the practical issues of how you might be using a coaching approach with these kinds of clients or patients indeed. Okay, so unless there's anything else, I will ask Sophie to stop the recording and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you very much.